Note here, therefore, one with FDN. So today we have letters 127 to 129, part 1, chronological sequence by Vibha. She doesn't need any introduction in this forum, but very quickly, she is a graduate from Pune University, BSc, and Masters in Computers. She's a software developer. She has been an IT professional, worked abroad for several years. She became a member of the TS and in 2015 and really understood the language and our book so clearly that she was able to explain so much to all of us. It's been such a great privilege to listen to her. She's a secretary of the Noida Lodge and president of the TOS at Delhi. So welcome, Vibha.
Thank you so much, Vimalji, and good evening, dear brothers and sisters. So, once again, we are back with the study of the Mahatma letters to AP Sinnet, and I'll be covering chronological letter number 127, 128, and 129. So, this letter number 127, it is a letter from Madam Blavatsky to AP Sinnet, which was written and received in July 1884. And before I share the slides with you on this letter, I just want to give a brief background what this letter is about. So around this time, that is in July 1884, Madame Blavatsky, she was in Europe at the time. She was in Paris and then she went to London. And Sinnet had protested to her about some of the happenings. He had received a letter from Mahatma KH, which we know the previous letter, chronological letter number 126. So that was written by the Mahatma KH to Sinnet, and he protested about that letter to Madame Blavatsky. In that letter, Mahatma KH mentioned that he never approached Mr. Sinnet or anyone through Mrs. Holloway. Now, Mrs. Holloway, we know that she was an American widow and clairvoyant, and she had come to England. She was associated, she had become a member of the Theosophical Society. So she had come to Europe to meet the Theosophists here. And for a time, she stayed with at the house of Mr. Sinnet. And she had written a book also together with Mohini Chatterjee. And then later she had become a chela of Mahatma KH. So this letter, the previous letter in which Mahatma KH had mentioned that he had not approached Mr. Sinnet through Mrs. Holloway. So Sinnet firmly believed that Mahatma KH had actually spoken through her, and he had even possessed her in a meeting which took place on July 6th. But although Mahatma KH mentions otherwise, as we have already seen in this previous letter number 126. Therefore, that letter number 126, Sinnet thought that that letter is not genuine. He thought that it is not from Mahatma KH. And this is an indication of how doubt takes over, how doubt leads to lack of faith, and it makes the person entirely unfit for practical occultism. And even later, as time went by, Sinnet became more and more unsupportive of the founders, that is Madame Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott. And then in this letter, the one which we will consider, letter number 127, Sinnet, he also had protested about Colonel Olcott's unconventional behavior to Madame Blavatsky. Because at that time, perhaps during the London Lodge meeting, in front of all the guests, Olcott had appeared in a very unconventional dress. Maybe he was dressed up like the sadhus or the Mahatmas of the Himalayas. And that was very much contrary to the Western societal norms. And Sinnet expected people to be formally dressed, and he wanted only the elite people to be part of those lodge meetings. If you remember in the letter number 125, which was from Mahatma M, Mahatma M has used the term extravagant Asiatic undresses for Olcott in that letter. So this was the reference that how Colonel Olcott was dressed when he appeared for that meeting. Now, this is an indication of how people they fall for outward appearances while totally ignoring the inner spiritual growth of any person. And in addition, at that time, Madame Blavatsky and Ernest Olcott, they were very friendly with the members of the Society for Psychical Research. The Society for Psychical Research, their members, they were very curious about the Mahatmas and the phenomena which Madame Blavatsky had shown on several occasions. And Olcott, he agreed to be interviewed by them. So Olcott made some statements which were considered very unscientific by his interviewers. And as a result, and also due to some more embarrassing incidents on part of Colonel Olcott, that Society for Psychical Research, they decided to send an investigator to Adyar. So these were the things about which Sinnet had mentioned to HPB, and he had raised a protest. And now HPB's reply follows in this letter number 127. So I will share these slides with you. So Madame Blavatsky wrote to Sinnet, "My dear Mr. Sinnet, it is very strange that you should be ready to deceive yourself so willingly. I have seen last night whom I had to see, and getting the explanation I wanted, I am now settled on points I was not only doubtful about, but positively adverse to accepting. And the words in the first line are words I am bound to repeat to you as a warning. And because I regard you, after all, as one of my best personal friends, now you have and are deceiving, in vulgar parlance, bamboozling yourself about the letter received by me yesterday from the Mahatma. The letter is from him, whether written through a chela or not, and perplexing as it may seem to you. Contradictory and absurd, it is the full expression of his feelings, and he maintains what he said in it." So, Madame Blavatsky, she was astonished. She was surprised, and she could hardly believe that Sinnet was becoming the victim of doubt, the victim of deceptive appearances of outward things. But then she sought and she received explanation from the one she had to meet. She's telling Sinnet. And after receiving that explanation about the things which were probably from the Mahatma, then she was convinced that Sinnet is willingly deceiving himself by allowing doubts and suspicions to rise in his mind. Madame Blavatsky always regarded Mr. Sinnet as her personal best friend. So she even tries to warn him about this. Sinnet doubted whether the previous letter, that is letter 126, which he received, whether that was actually from the Mahatma or not. And this letter which Madam HPB received, whether that is from the Mahatma or not. So Sinnet had in his mind that perhaps the letter had come just from some chela. But Madame Blavatsky knew, and she firmly maintained that the letter was from Mahatma KH, and its contents were also the Mahatma's words. So this is a clear indicator for us how doubt, when it takes over our mind, then we disbelieve even the truth. We disbelieve even the words of the Mahatma. See what doubt can do to us. So this doubt is the foremost obstacle on the path of occultism. Madame Blavatsky further mentioned, "For me, it is surpassingly strange that you should accept as his only that which dovetails with your own feelings and reject all that contradicts your own notions of the fitness of things. Now, this is very common human nature. We tend to agree with another person's views or ideas only as far as it conforms to our own views. Our views may be biased, but if the other person's views conforms to it, then we will agree. But we tend to reject whatever does not conform to our own personal ideas about right and wrong. And this is exactly what Sinnet was doing. He was behaving in this way. He was accepting only those things from the Mahatma which suited him. And he was rejecting those things which contradicted his own idea of the correctness of things by saying that this letter is not from the Mahatma. So Madame Blavatsky finds this very strange because Sinnet was a very sincere aspirant. He was deeply theosophist, and yet he had fallen prey to this kind of a doubt. Then Madame Blavatsky, she agrees that Alcott has behaved like an ass, utterly devoid of tact. He confesses it and is ready to confess it and say mea culpa before all the theosophists. This is a Latin phrase which means that it is my fault, mea culpa. This is perhaps why, with all his lack of tact and his frequent freaks that justly shock your susceptibilities and mine too, heaven knows, going as he does against every conventionality, he is still so liked by the masters who care not for the flowers of European civilization. Flowers of European civilization. These are the outward appearance of those so-called civilized men. Now, no doubt that Colonel Olcott sometimes he behaved in very unconventional ways. And this is what Sinnet was protesting about, the unconventional ways of Colonel Olcott. Yet, Colonel Olcott, he was immensely liked by the masters because he was true to the cause. And at this point in the letter, it is worth mentioning why the Mahatmas liked Colonel Olcott. This we can gather from the previous letters. In fact, in chronological letter number 5, in that Mahatma KH, he has written to Sinnet in 1880. Okay, and in that he wrote to him about Colonel Olcott that Colonel Olcott is doubtless out of time with the feelings of English people. This is written in letter number 5. But nevertheless, more in time with us. That means more in time with the Mahatmas. Him we can trust under all circumstances, and his faithful service is pledged to us, come well, come ill. So, whether good or bad, he is always his faithful service is always pledged to the Mahatmas. And the Mahatmas trust him under all circumstances. Where can we find an equal devotion? So see, devotion of Olcott. He never questions, but obeys. I'm reading these points to bring out the fact that what are the things master looks for in the aspirant. So devotion, then never questioning, always obeying. He makes innumerable mistakes out of excessive zeal, but never is unwilling to repair his fault, even at the cost of the greatest self-humiliation. That is what he did even now, where it is mentioned that he is ever ready to accept his faults. And then he esteems sacrifice of comfort, and even life, which he can cheerfully risk whenever necessary. So even if there's a risk to his own life, but he is ready to risk that. He will eat any food, go even without any food. He will sleep in any bed, work in any place, fraternize with any outcast, endure any privation. You see the amount of trouble he is ready to undertake, the devotion which he has, and also whatever, if he makes a mistake, he's ready to confess whatever humiliation he has to face. So, this is the kind of devotion that Alcott had for the masters. And that is why he was dear to the masters. Sorry. And then in another letter, Mahatma KH has also mentioned about Colonel Alcott that his magnetism, after 6 years of purification, is intensely sympathetic with ours. So, see, that was the nature and behavior, his devotion, his sacrifice, and his humbleness. Now, here it is the spiritual quality that Colonel Alcott's magnetism, it was very pure and intensely sympathetic with our with ours. That means with the Mahatmas. Physically and morally is constantly becoming more and more so. So this is to do with his magnetism, the force which is there in every person, a spiritual force kind of. So that is pure and it is sympathetic with the Mahatma's magnetism. Sympathetic vibration means it has the same natural frequency like someone else's. Okay, so whatever we can say, many times we use the phrase that my frequency matches with his frequency, right? We say this very casually, but here actually it is that this magnetism of Colonel Alcott, it was in sympathetic vibration with the Mahatmas. So for these reasons and also for his nature, his behavior, he was immensely liked by the Mahatmas. Such is the thing which we need to try and cultivate within ourselves. So this was the nature and character of Colonel Alcott, and he was very much liked by the Mahatmas despite any faults. Madame Blavatsky further mentioned in the letter, had I known last night what I have learned since, that you imagine, or rather force yourself to imagine, that the Mahatma's letters is not wholly orthodox. Not wholly orthodox, meaning it is not coming from the Mahatmas, and was written by a chela to please me, or something of the sort. I would not have rushed to you as the only plank of salvation. Things are getting dark and hazy. I have managed last night to get the Psychic Research Society rid of its nightmare, Alcott. I may manage to get England rid of its bugbear, Theosophy. Bugbear meaning something which is the cause of a lot of fear or anxiety. Okay. So Theosophy was causing this great ripples in the Western society in England. If you, the most devoted and best of all Theosophists, are all ready to fall a victim to your own preconceptions and believe in new gods of your own fancy, dethroning the old ones, then, notwithstanding all and everything, Theosophy has come too early in this country. Now, you look at how this communication had started. Masters had started communicating with Sinnet in 1880. Madame Blavatsky considered Sinnet as the most devoted and the best of all Theosophists. And she approached him to clarify the doubts that he was harboring in his mind about the genuineness of the Mahatma letter. But now, after so many years of aspiration and devotion, Sinnet was even doubting whether the master's letter contained really the words of the master or simply some chela. That doubt had entered in his mind. So Madame Blavatsky says things are getting dark and hazy. Not only Sinnet was under grip of this doubt and suspicion, but the Society for Psychical Research that also decided to carry out an investigation at Adyar because of Colonel Olcott's statements. She says, Madame Blavatsky says, I have managed last night to get the Psychic Research Society rid of its nightmare Olcott. I may manage to get England rid of its bugbear Theosophy. So this could perhaps mean that the people of England could altogether lose their trust in Theosophy if the Society for Psychical Research came up with a contrary report. And they had decided to go and investigate in Adyar, which was due to Colonel Olcott's interview. So we've already seen that members of the Society for Psychical Research, they were very curious about as to whether the Mahatmas actually exist and what is this kind of phenomena that was being demonstrated, which had been performed at Shimla. And so they wanted to carry out and investigate and find it for themselves. Now, during the period of the communication with the Mahatma, Sinnet was given many occult teachings. He even wrote 2 great books among many other books. One was Esoteric Buddhism and the other was The Occult World. And Mahatma Gage approved of those books. But whatever trust and faith Sinnet had built for these occult principles, he was now dethroning them. He was removing that trust, that faith from his mind, and he was replacing them with these new gods. The new gods were doubt and suspicion, and they were created out of his own fancy. So if such a sincere aspirant like Sinnet, he could falter from the path of occultism, then the ordinary people of his country, the ordinary people of England, they could hardly be expected to be ready for Theosophy. So that is why HPB is saying that perhaps Theosophy has come too early in this country. Towards the end, she says, let your LLTS, meaning London Lodge Theosophical Society, go on as it does. I cannot help it. And what I mean, I will tell you when I see you. But I will have nothing to do with the new arrangement and retire from it altogether, unless we agree to disagree no more. So this refers to the events which were happening at the time in London. Sinnet had become the president of the London Lodge, and this was after he defeated Mrs. Anna Kingsford. But he was having some disagreements with Madame Blavatsky about the new arrangements of that lodge. And also years later, Sinnet, he became increasingly unsupportive of Madame Blavatsky. So Madame Blavatsky said that she would not have anything to do with the new arrangement unless they would stop disagreeing with each other. So this was a short letter, letter number 127, and it concludes here. We'll also go now to the next letter. That is letter number 128, which is the Mahatma letter number 63 in the Barker series. And this letter is from Mahatma KH to AP Sinnet, which was written in the summer of 1884. Now, in this letter, Mr. Sinnet, we know he had written this book, which I mentioned earlier, Esoteric Buddhism. And this book is based on the teachings which were given to him in the Mahatma letters. Now, after this book was published in 1883. So after this book was published, Sinnet would read portions out of his correspondence to the Mahatma, that is, portions out of the letters. He would read them at the meetings in the London Lodge. And many members, they were very impressed with these readings, and they pressed Sinnet for permission to make copies of that. So that was the background. First of all, that book had come out, Esoteric Buddhism, which was based on whatever was written in the letters. And then when Sinnet started reading some parts of those letters, the members of the lodge, they wanted to make copies of that. So then Sinnet asked Mahatma KH about the possibility of publishing the letters, whichever were written to him by the Mahatmas. And in this letter, Mahatma KH, he specifically prohibits this course of action. And he explains why they must not be published. So this letter number 128 is about why the letter should not be published. Mahatma KH writes to Mr. Sinnet, "Good friend, when our first correspondence began, there was no idea then of any publications being issued on the basis of the replies you might receive. You went on putting questions at random and the answers being given at different times to disjointed queries, and so to say, under a semi-protest, were necessarily imperfect, often from different standpoints." So the Mahatmas, Mahatma KH and Mahatma M, they began correspondence by letters with Mr. A.P. Sinnet and A.O. Hume in 1880s by precipitation or by psychic means. And the letters, they were transmitted through the agency of Madame Blavatsky, and there were others like Damodar Mavlankar and many other chelas. So this is how the correspondence began, the method of the correspondence. And this correspondence, it was not because of the personal virtues of Mr. Sinnet and Mr. Hume. It was not due to that they were so great or they were so spiritually advanced. That was not the reason. But the reason was that out of all the lay chelas, out of all the members, Sinnet and Hume, they were in a position, they were socially in a position to utilize these occult teachings and facts which were to be given to them for the general good and the general benefit of all people. So this Mahatma KH has actually mentioned in his letter number 68, chronological letter number 68, that this was the reason the communication had started. Okay, so it was not due to the qualities or the personal virtues of those two people, Sinnet and Hume, but rather because their social standing was such. Sinnet was the editor of the Pioneer, and Mr. Hume, he was a high-ranking British official. So they had this position by which they could utilize the teaching for the good of a vast number of people. Now, in that same letter, letter number 68, Mahatma KH has also mentioned that both of them, that means Sinnet and Hume, they should regard the teachings received, whatever would be given to them by the Mahatmas, they should regard those teachings in trust. That means they are the custodians. They should regard those teachings in trust for the benefit of the whole society, to be turned over and employed and re-employed in many ways and in all ways that are good. So they had to utilize those teachings for the good. No month should pass without writing a fragment, long or short, for the magazine. These are the words of the Mahatma. So what he's mentioning, he's referring to that fragment. That was a series, fragments of occult truth, which was published in the Theosophist, that is the magazine. So Mahatma Ji is saying that whatever teachings would be given to Sinnet and Hume, every month they should write an article in the fragment and it should get published in that magazine. So the people would benefit, because the Theosophist, it was the mouthpiece of this Theosophical Society. It was the official journal, and it would be available for reading to all the people. So the teachings would be disseminated. This was the real reason that the Mahatmas were corresponding with Sinnet and Hume. And there was no intention of having the letters themselves published. Okay. So from the letters, the teachings would be written in the fragment, which would be published in the journal, the Theosophist, and people would have access to it. But the letters were not supposed to be published. Moreover, the letters, they were not written in a format like sequential topic. If you want to publish something, it has to be properly categorized, properly sequenced. So that was not the case with the letters. The letters, they contained answers to the questions which Sinnet raised randomly. They were disjointed queries. No sequence, meaning the questions were not connected to the same context. One question would be referring to some one context. The other question could be totally about something else. So there was no continuity about teachings on any particular topic. So this kind of disjointed information that was not to be published. Mahatma Ji himself mentions that the replies, they were necessarily imperfect from different standpoints. So one thing, that the teachings were not continuous, they were disjointed queries. And then the replies, they were necessarily imperfect from different standpoints. Now, why should the replies be imperfect? They were given by the masters. That is because the Mahatmas, they were also bound by the rules of the White Lodge. They were allowed only to reveal so and so. They couldn't reveal more than that. So these were the restrictions under which they were communicating with Mr. Sinnet and Mr. Hume. So from the standpoint of a lay person who is receiving these teachings, a lay person who is lacking in occult knowledge, some of the teachings could appear paradoxical. It would appear as incorrect to him. And in fact, we know that this was the cause of a lot of misunderstanding in the minds of Mr. Sinnet and Mr. Hume. We've already seen in the previous letters how even they accused, Mr. Hume even accused the Mahatmas of giving incorrect or paradoxical teachings. So, but the Mahatma's view was that knowledge could only be communicated gradually. Else, even the highest truths could sound as gibberish. So that was the reason that all these letters, whatever knowledge it contained, which was fragmented and which appeared as incorrect to the lay people, such letters should not be published. Mahatma Ji mentions, when the publication of some of these were permitted for the occult world, it was hoped that among your readers, some may be able, like yourself, to put all the different pieces together and evolve out of them the skeleton or a shadow of our system, which, although not exactly the original, this would be an impossibility, would be as near an approach to it as could be made by a non-initiate. Now, Occult World, the book written by Mr. Sinnet, and it was based on the teachings from the Mahatma letters. This book was published in London in 1881. This letter is of 1884. So Mahatma Ji permitted the publication of that book, hoping that any person who had developed even a little bit of intuitive faculty. So please note here, intuitive faculty. Any person who has developed even a little bit of intuitive faculty, he would be able to perceive at least an outline, at least a shadow of the Arhat esoteric philosophy. He could do that by reading the book, this book which Sinnet published, The Occult World. He could piece the occult facts together. So they fit in together like a jigsaw puzzle. And his own intuition, by that he could come up with an outline of the Arhat esoteric philosophy. This is the philosophy or the system of the Trans-Himalayan Brotherhood, a mention of it has been made in chronological letter number 68. Okay, so a non-initiate, a lay person who has not been initiated, he could only approach the occult philosophy so much. He could only come up to an approximation, an outline. He could not get the exact original truth. But even this would be a great step forward for man. So this is what the Mahatmas had hoped. But let us see what happened. But the results have proved quasi-disastrous. We had tried an experiment and sadly failed. So this was the experiment. The experiment was to allow publishing of that book, some of the occult teachings that were mentioned in the letters. And the Mahatmas hoped that those who would read the book and those who had at least some intuitive abilities, they may possibly arrive at the approximate esoteric philosophy. But this experiment did not fully bear the results which the Mahatmas had hoped for. Now we see, Mahatmaji is mentioning to Sinnet, now we see that none but those who have passed at least their third initiation are able to write upon those subjects comprehensively. Now, this is a very important statement, and you must understand the full import of this sentence. None but those who have passed at least their third initiation. What is initiation? So many times we come across this word in Theosophic literature. So initiations, we can think of them like milestones on the spiritual path. The initiations, they mark the 7 stages on this path at which the aspirant will discover. He will discover the secret of the 7-fold principles which are there in man and nature. And also his dormant powers will be awakened. The detail of this you can see in the Mahatma letter number 15. This letter is in the Barker series, letter number 15 of the Barker series. In that, initiation has been explained in these terms. So initiation is accompanied by an expansion of consciousness and power and revelation of the secrets of the 7-fold principles which are there in nature and man. So it is clear, Mahatmaji is telling Sinnet, it is clear that only a person who has reached the third initiation, the third milestone on the path, only he has the knowledge and experience to write about the esoteric Arhat philosophy comprehensively, covering all its aspects with clarity. See, what experiment they had tried, that Sinnet is writing the book, giving some of the occult facts, and people who have this intuition, they will be able to piece together and come up with the philosophy. But that didn't happen. So Mahatmaji is telling that now they realize only a person who has reached the third initiation, only he will be having the knowledge and experience to understand and write about this esoteric Arhat philosophy comprehensively. Now, why does Mahatmaji say third initiation? That the person who has passed at least his third initiation. So, I hope that you are familiar with those initiations which are given in the Buddhist tradition. The first one is Rotapatti, second is Sakridagami, third is Anagami, fourth is Arhat, and fifth is Adept or Ashik. So third one he's talking about, third is Anagami. Now what does that mean? Third initiation. Third initiation, it marks the Anagami stage. What does it mean? It means the person who has reached that level, that milestone, he does not have to take birth again. Anagami, he will not come again. Why he does not have to take birth again? Because he has actually realized the knowledge. See, even we are studying, so we are gaining knowledge, but we have not realized, meaning we have not experienced. But the person who has undergone third initiation, he has experienced that knowledge. That real man is the immortal individuality. That is Atma, Buddhi, Manas. So he has experienced it, meaning he can consciously exist in his individuality. If he can consciously exist in his individuality, then the lower quaternary or the personality, it may exist or may not exist, it does not matter to him because he consciously lives in his individuality. That is why there is no rebirth, because rebirth happens of this transient personality. Okay, so such person is also called Jivan Mukt. That Jivan of that personality, it is not needed. Personality may exist, all right, or it may not exist, all right. But the person exists as the individual. So that is the thing. Once conscious existence in individuality is attained, then rebirth in transient personality is no longer necessary. And this happens when the person has reached the third initiation. So now see, we have this theoretical knowledge that the real man is individuality. He is not the personality. But when he reaches third initiation, he actually experiences it. Meaning he can exist as individuality and the personality is of no consequence to him. Only then he is able to write upon these esoteric Arhat philosophy correctly and comprehensively. Before that, he is writing only theoretically. So that is the deep meaning what Mahatma Ji has mentioned in this statement. Now we see that none but those who have passed at least the third initiation are able to write upon those subjects comprehensively. So experiential knowledge is a must, is a requirement. And then he talks about these other people who have written books. But what? A Herbert Spencer would have made a mess of it under your circumstances. Mohini is certainly not quite right. In some details, he's positively wrong. But so are you, my old friend. Though the outside reader is none the wiser for it, and no one so far has noticed the real vital errors in esoteric Buddhism and man, nor are they likely to. So even this intellectual knowledge people possess, okay, not experiential knowledge. Great intellectuals like Herbert Spencer or even accepted chelas like Mohini M. Chatterjee or lay chelas like A.P. Sinnet, they could not get the Arhat esoteric philosophy correctly. So if they could not get it correctly, what can be expected of the common man who's going to read their books? How correctly can he understand the philosophy? These books, Esoteric Buddhism of A.P. Sinnet and the book Man, Fragments of a Forgotten History, which was written by Mohini Chatterjee and Mrs. Holloway. Both the books, they have some real vital errors, Mahatma Ji is saying. Those vital errors are from standpoint of the highest truth. But for lack of any intuitive faculty, no common reader is likely to notice it. So we have a little bit more time. I'll take one more slide. We can give no further information on the subject already approached by you and have to leave the facts already communicated to be woven into a consistent and systematic philosophy by the chelas at the headquarters. The secret doctrine will explain many things, set to write more than one perplexed student. So the Mahatmas, as we said, they were working under restrictions. They were bound and restricted by the laws of the White Brotherhood, and they could not share more occult truths and facts with Sinnet than what they had already given out in their letters. And then the writing of Secret Doctrine, it had already commenced in 1884. Although it was published, the book was published much later, but it had already started in 1884. And it would put together all these teachings which were given till that point, it would put all of them into a consistent and systematic philosophy, it was hoped. But I'm sure even now many people find Secret Doctrine very challenging to read. But it was hoped that it will put it into a consistent and systematic philosophy, and it would also set right the vital errors, omissions, and gaps in the previous works of other authors, like which Mahatma Ji mentioned in Sinnet's book and even in Mohini Chatterjee's book. So that was a cause of confusion for the students of Theosophy, and Secret Doctrine was supposed to put everything right. So even now, when we study Mahatma letters, it is very important to go back and refer to the same topic in the Secret Doctrine, because perhaps one will be able to attain a better understanding when we read the same concept in the Secret Doctrine. Further, Mahatma KH has mentioned, therefore, to put before the world all the crude and complicated material in your possession in the shape of old letters, in which I confess much was purposely made obscure. See another point, much was purposely made obscure, would only be making confusion worse confounded. Instead of doing any good thereby to yourself and others, it would only place you in a still more difficult position, bringing criticism upon the heads of the masters, and thus have a retarding influence. A retarding influence on human progress and the Theosophical Society. Hence, I protest most strongly against your new idea. So this was the real reason why masters did not want the letters to be published. The complicated occult truths mentioned in them, they were written in an obscure way, purposely, and they would only add to the confusion of the people. And this would have a retarding effect on the progress of the Theosophical Society and of mankind. And the masters wanted the Secret Doctrine to clear all these confusions and comprehensively put forth the occult philosophy before the world, rather than publishing the letters and creating more confusion. So this was the point I had planned to complete till today. And we will continue the remaining letter and the last one, letter 129, in the next session. So now I
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, go ahead. Yeah. So thank you, Vibhaji. And now we request Meenakshi ji to give the Hindi translation.
नमस्ते, थैंक यू सिस्टर। आज हम लेटर नंबर 127 और 128 ले रहे हैं। लेटर नंबर 127 यह पत्र HPB सीनेट को लिखती है जुलाई 1884 में। यह पत्र सीनेट की मास्टर के एच और कर्नल ओलकॉट की शिकायत के प्रत्युत्तर में है। HPB कहती है कि यह बहुत अजीब बात है कि आप इतनी सहजता से स्वयं को बहक जाने के लिए तैयार हैं। मैंने कल रात उन्हें देखा जिनसे मुझे मिलना था, और जो स्पष्टीकरण मैं चाहती थी उन्हें पाकर मैं उन बातों पर सुनिश्चित हो गई हूँ जिनके बारे में मैं न केवल संदिग्ध थी बल्कि उन्हें स्वीकार करने के लिए मैं बिल्कुल ही तैयार नहीं थी। अब आप महात्मा द्वारा कल मुझे प्राप्त पत्र पर भी संदेह करते हैं और स्वयं को बहुत ही भद्दी भाषा में धोखे में ला रहे हैं। वह पत्र महात्मा द्वारा है, चाहे किसी चेला द्वारा लिखा हो गया हो या नहीं, और चाहे आपको अजीब लगे, विरोधाभासी और बेतुका लगे, यह उनकी भावनाओं से ओतप्रोत है और उसमें जो लिखा है उस पर वे कायम है। मेरे लिए यह बहुत ही अजीब बात है कि आप केवल उन्हीं की बातें स्वीकार करते हैं जो आपकी भावनाओं से मेल खाते हैं, और जो आपके धारणाओं के विपरीत हो उन्हें नकारते हैं। कर्नल ऑलकॉट एक व्यवहार कुशलता कर्नल ऑलकॉट ने व्यवहार कुशलता नहीं दिखाई। वे यह स्वीकार करते हैं और सभी थियोसॉफिस्टों के सामने माफी मांगने के लिए तैयार है। ऐसा शायद ही कोई अंग्रेज स्वेच्छा से करेगा, यह उससे भी बड़ी बात है। वे शिष्टाचार का पालन नहीं करते हैं, फिर भी वे मास्टर्स के पसंदीदा हैं। मास्टर्स यूरोपीय सभ्यता के अभिजात वर्ग की परवाह नहीं करते हैं। आगे एचपीबी कहती है कि मैंने कल रात साइकिक रिसर्च सोसाइटी को उसकी परेशानी यानी कर्नल ऑलकॉट से छुटकारा दिलाया। मैं इंग्लैंड को उसके आतंक थियोसॉफी से मुक्ति दिला सकती हूँ। यदि आप, जो सभी थियोसॉफिस्ट में से सबसे समर्पित, सबसे श्रेष्ठ, अपनी पूर्व धारणाओं का शिकार बनने को तैयार हैं और स्वयं की कल्पना में विश्वास करते हैं, तब इन सब कुछ के बावजूद इस देश में थियोसॉफी का आगमन बहुत जल्द हुआ है। आपकी लंदन लॉज थियोसॉफिकल सोसाइटी जैसे चल रही है चलने दे, मैं इसमें कुछ नहीं कर सकती। लेकिन मुझे नई व्यवस्थापना से कोई लेना देना नहीं होगा, और जब तक हम कोई मतभेद न होने के लिए सहमत होते हैं, मैं इससे पूर्णतः अलग हो जाऊंगी। अगला पत्र है क्रोनोलॉजिकल लेटर नंबर 128। यह पत्र मास्टर के एच ने एपी सिनेट को लिखा था। मास्टर कहते हैं कि प्रथम बार जब हमारे बीच पत्र व्यवहार शुरू हुआ, तब आपको प्राप्त उत्तरों के आधार पर उन्हें प्रकाशित करने का कोई विचार नहीं था। आप विभिन्न प्रकार के प्रश्न पूछते रहे और अलग अलग समय पर असंगत प्रश्नों के उत्तर दिए गए, और थोड़े बहुत विरोध के तहत अक्सर अलग अलग दृष्टिकोणों से अवश्य ही वे अपूर्ण थे। जब इनमें से कुछ पत्रों की ऑकल्ट वर्ल्ड की पुस्तक के प्रकाशन के लिए अनुमति दी गई थी, तब यह आशा की गई थी कि आपकी तरह आपके पाठकों में से कुछ पाठक सभी अलग अलग टुकड़ों में बटे ज्ञान को एक साथ जोड़कर उसमें से हमारी प्रणाली की रूपरेखा को समझने में सक्षम होंगे, चाहे पूरी तरह मूल रूप में न सही, क्योंकि यह असंभव है, फिर भी एक अदीक्षित द्वारा उसके करीब तक जाने का उसका प्रयास होगा। लेकिन इसके परिणाम अच्छे नहीं हुए। यह हमारा एक प्रयोग था जिसमें दुर्भाग्य से हम असफल रहे। अब हम देखते हैं कि केवल वे ही इन विषयों पर विस्तारित रूप से या व्यापक रूप से लिखने में सक्षम हैं जिन्होंने कम से कम तीसरी दीक्षा को पार किया है। आपके लिखित पुस्तक के तहत हर्बर्ट स्पेंसर जैसों ने उसे समझने में गड़बड़ी कर दी होती। मोहिनी निश्चित ही सही नहीं है, कुछ विवरणों में वे निश्चित ही गलत है, लेकिन आप भी उतने ही गलत हैं। एसोटेरिक बुद्धिज्म और मैन इन किताबों के लिए बाहरी पाठक अभी नासमझ है, और किसी ने भी इन किताबों में हुई महत्वपूर्ण त्रुटियों को नहीं जाना, न ही वे जान पाएंगे। आपके द्वारा प्रस्तावित विषय पर हम और ज्यादा जानकारी नहीं दे सकते, और पहले दिए गए तथ्यों को सुसंगत और व्यवस्थित फिलोसॉफी में ढालने का कार्य हेडक्वार्टर्स के चेलाओं पर छोड़ देना चाहिए। सीक्रेट डॉक्ट्रिन बहुत सी बातों को स्पष्ट करेगा और उलझे हुए अभ्यासकों को सही दिशा देगा। इसलिए आपके पास पुराने पत्रों में दी गई जटिल अशोधित सामग्री, जिसे जानबूझकर अस्पष्ट रखा गया था, यह मैं स्वीकार करता हूँ, उसे दुनिया के सामने रखने से और ज्यादा उलझने बढ़ेगी। आपको और दूसरों को लाभ होने के बजाय उससे आप ज्यादा मुश्किल में आएंगे, जिससे मास्टर्स के ऊपर आलोचना होगी और इस तरह थियोसॉफिकल सोसाइटी और मनुष्य की प्रगति को अवरुद्ध करेंगी। इसीलिए मैं आपकी नई कल्पना को पुरजोर विरोध करता हूँ। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you so much, Meenakshi. So now we can open up for discussions if there's any. I'd just like to add something to this. So basically, the beginning of the first letter that we covered, in which Mahatma is telling Sinnet that I did not speak through Laura Holloway. Now, what is that whole story about? So, the thing is that Laura Holloway was an American who was so inspired by the two books written by Sinnet, Esoteric Buddhism and Occult World, that she actually came from America and came to UK, stayed in London with the Sinnets. Now, Blavatsky did not want Holloway to stay with Sinnet because later on in another letter it comes that there were some elementaries in Sinnet's house, and Holloway was a psychic, she was sensitive, and that would have disturbed her. So that was one of the reasons Blavatsky was against Holloway staying with the Sinnets. Another thing was the Sinnets were trying, like at least Alfred Sinnet was trying to, I'm not sure about his wife, but he was trying to get this lady Holloway to do some psychic things. Like he was trying to get in touch with the masters through her. And at one point in one meeting, she started speaking as if the masters are speaking to her. So about that, the master is telling that it was not me at all. She was influenced by something else, but it was not me at all coming through her. So later on, if you look at Holloway's future so-called theosophical career, she actually moves away from it. And in a few letters after this, you will see that even the masters are not sure about her anymore. They find that there are problems with her. She has a lot of ego, or she's not able to be as unselfish as although she was accepted as a chela at that. So later on in her life, she goes back to America, dissociates with theosophy altogether. That is Laura Holloway, and she joins the Shaker community. Now, Shaker community is a community of people who live away from society and everything, and they don't follow the Christian church. They don't believe that is just the beliefs of the Christian church. There seems to be like a very humanistic and good community, but peculiarly they believed in a lot of music and dance. So that's why they were called Shakers, because they said moving around dancing. So that is a little history about Laura Holloway. And I am actually a little tempted to read that book written by Holloway after this, and Mohini Chatterjee. That's what I wanted to share.
Very good,
That's
very
all.
nice. Vimalji, what you have mentioned is absolutely right about Mrs. Holloway. She had, in fact, a very high spiritual ambition. She wanted to be the first one to achieve, the spiritual growth. And that was a hidden thing in her heart. About this, it is mentioned in one of the letters. Even to harbor a spiritual ambition is actually detrimental to the occult growth. And many people fall prey to this. They think that the master is communicating through them. So they start channeling the master. Whereas it is some other elementaries who are speaking through them. So one should always guard against that. And this is the thing which happens in Sinnet's enthusiasm. He thinks that, yes, master is speaking through her. So that was the doubt which comes. See, this is how we stumble on the path of occultism. Doubt and ambition and things like that. So this part of this will be covered in the next letter, in the last letter, 129.
Anybody else wants to add something or ask a question?
Rajiv ji was saying something.
Actually, sorry. Actually, Laura Holloway, there are 3 or 4 letters in Master's Letter Series number 1, which we have completed. She was selected to replace Blavatsky. Means Blavatsky, when she left Adair and settled at England, Holloway was the person with the intention of Mahatmas that he will communicate to Sinnet through Holloway. But somehow other Holloway has the same doubt in her mind, doubt whether she is already accepted as a disciple or already lay disciple, something. And she also, as Bimalji just now spoken, she was in contact with others. So that prevented Mahatma to accept her another medium to communicate. And at that time, Mahachan also interfered, and that was not possible again to communicate with the letters to Sinnet. And then the second point I want like add regarding the initiation, there very little things as mentioned here in Mahatma letters, but in 1925, probably after the publication of this letter in 1923 or early 1921, Brother Leadbeater published Masters and Path. Now many things has edited, and in abridged versions, many things are not available, which is available in e-books. In that Masters, Mahatma, the Masters and Path, Brother Leadbeater has given details about the initiation. Of course, Anivesant, like other students, clearly mentioned it is his personal insight. Whatever he has seen, he narrated. Initially, it was for ES people. Now it is for open for all members, and after it is edited by, I don't know who edited, but there are many things there. Once one accepted as a disciple, then stages will be son of the disciple, then first initiation he will take, then next second initiation. Before taking second initiation, there are three fetters, and the third initiation, between second third there was a very dangerous stage. Then in third initiation, which is in Hindus, we are calling Hans, and here they are calling this, what is, they have mentioned here in the Masters and Path. That is before third initiation, that is a danger point. Second and third initiation, and in the third initiation, it is Anagamin, which Hindus, I just like to mention, Hindus mention it as a Hans, and for fourth initiation Arhat, Hindus mention it Paramhans. So this Hans word Leadbeater clarified, it is known as Soham. That means that am I. And here he has given an example. Soham means a swan is able to separate milk from water. So that is the stage in which a initiate, which means third initiation, who has completed, they can realize the true value of life around him. Something Leadbeater given in detailed description, and also it is same thing in the Theosophy 1 to 5 initiations, completing after completion of 10 fetters. Then also the same thing with a Buddhist, same thing also the Christians. So the initiation chapter, which was in the Mahatma letters, Mahatma has never explained, but Brother Leadbeater has given details how to the stages of initiation: first initiation, second initiation, third initiation, then fourth, then fifth initiation. After that fifth initiation, what are the 7 ways open for the adept or the Jivan Mukta or the Asheka? So all these things, it is detailed described by Brother Leadbeater in Master and Path. Those who are interested, they can purchase the books, or if it is available, they can go through that. But it is the insight of Brother Leadbeater. Many people they can doubt Leadbeater's insight, or they can go through it. Anyway, that is all. That's all.
I request Shindeji to add something, sir.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Vibhaji. Very nicely you explained. And the very simple words, but you explained it very nicely. Thank you very much for the exposition of the truth. In fact, one sentence, it gave me insight that why masters telling theosophy is brought early in your country. That sentence itself says we are not yet prepared. As you have rightly said, the theosophy can be deeply understood when one becomes to the level of third initiation. And it is this third initiation is, as you said rightly, it is that plane of Manasa principle. This third, Buddhic is again fourth initiation, like that, and Atmic, fifth, all that. But this Manasa level, higher mind level. So unless we reach to this, we cannot understand theosophy. And in Key to Theosophy also, HPB said, society is founded to say the word or propagate or say that theosophy like thing exists. That is what in Key to Theosophy HPB said. So this is very early it is brought. That is one point I want to add in this. It is really, one has to think over it. Secondly, they appreciated Colonel Alcott. Whether he was initiated or not initiated or whatever it is, whether he is going to the third initiation or not, and he was not bothered about all that. What was good in him, that is said.
Yes.
And during Alcott, see, Alcott conversation was there with the masters because he was concerned with the future of the Theosophical Society. And this was his permanent concern up to the end of his life, which occurred at the age of 75. And number 7 was very peculiar to Colonel Alcott. He died at the age of 75 at 7:17 a.m. on 17th February 1907. It is perhaps coincidental that he had always been especially interested in and influenced by the number 7. Septenary concept is given to the world by Theosophy, which is very important to contemplate. So why we are not understanding, we must relate this septenary world. As Vibhaji said rightly, we have to rise one by one step from physical, astral to the manas and then to the buddhic. So this septenary is very important. And during Alcott's last days, when he was ill with his failing heart, he was several times visited astrally by Mahatma, M and K. So this astral level where the second initiation takes place. So he several times met the master at the astral level. We don't know whether we have met at astral level or not because we are not aware of the astral level or not conscious of the astral level. So these two things, they stuck me to think over it. That is what I have added. Vibhaji, if I am not correct, you can correct it.
No, sir, you have elaborated and made it much more, brought more clarity to it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I think it was a lovely discussion. So I think we can end the meeting today. We've passed the time.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Vibhaji, especially. Asatoma Satsam, Tamasoma Jyotism, Vidyorma Amritam. Om Shanti Shanti. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Namaste.